to a Too Much Effing Perspective rock and roll recreation, where we replay one of our effing favorite episodes from the past. I'm your host, Alan Keller.
And I'm your co-host, Alex Hoffman. Today, we're featuring the conversation from our inaugural episode. That is episode 1, with one of the most revered drummers in the world, Todd Sucherman. Todd plays with one of the seminal arena rock bands, Styx, which had massive hits like Come Sail Away, Renegade, and Too Much Time on My Hands.
And more importantly, he also played with one of the greatest bands in history.
Yep, that's true.
My band, the Falling Willendas.
Oh. Alan, I thought you were going to say he played with Spinal Tap.
Well, he played with them too.
Right. Todd played with Spinal Tap on several of the late night talk shows like The Tonight Show and others, and he didn't even spontaneously combust.
Well, to be fair, I spent a lot of time with Todd in recording studios back in the day, and those Slim Jims he was pounding almost made him spontaneously combust, and me vicariously.
I think it probably gave you spontaneous indigestion. But hey, Todd and I both enjoy late night snacking, so I can totally sympathize. But in any case, it is cool because Todd must feel very comfortable in that late night talk show environment because he just sat in with the Seth Meyers band for a week.
True.
And John Mulaney even said that he's a fan of Todd, and Todd looks a lot like Michael Douglas. Wow.
And if Douglas's wife, Catherine Zeta-Jones, thinks so too, he's got it made.
Todd already has it made, Alan. He's got a beautiful wife and family.
That's true. Taylor Mills, one of my favorite singers, is Todd's wife. She's fantastic. She used to sing with Brian Wilson.
Indeed. So let's get to our episode with Todd that originally aired on August 23rd, 2021.
Wait, it's the 3rd anniversary of our podcast?
It is indeed.
I didn't even get you a gift.
I'll be happy with a few Slim Jims, old chum, as we go back in time with our chat with Todd. But first, a short break.
You know, I just got the Dougal Butler book.
Oh, it's the best. It's the best rock and roll debauchery book ever. And it's all true.
Who's Dougal Butler?
Dougal Butler was Keith Moon's personal assistant from 1966 to 1977. He lived with him, toured with him, and it was his job to get him where he needed to be, wherever that was, on time and somewhat able to do whatever he's supposed to do there. Job that was incredibly difficult indeed, as you can imagine. And, you know, spoiler alert, there's a sad ending.
Right.
Is that got the Steve McQueen story in there?
It is in there. Yeah, Steve McQueen was Keith Moon's next door neighbor, Trancas Canyon, a little north of Malibu. And McQueen just hated him.
Why?
I think he would also have a telescope and he tried to catch Ally McGraw nude sunbathing. And there's some reports about him just sort of walking in when McQueen was having a party and just being drunk and disorderly and disruptive and whatnot.
I mean, we're here to talk about this as Spinal Tap, but that sounds like a scene out of the movie 10.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed it was pretty much that way. I mean, I was very sad for a while that book was out of print. Here in America, it's called Full Moon. And here in America, like, I don't know why I needed to say that. It had a different title in England. Here in America.
And, you know, Todd, you're in Texas, so you're not really not in America.
Not much longer anyway.
By the way, Texas is totally capable of messing with itself. So in case you were wondering.
Right.
But it's the best rock and roll debauchery book, and it's written with the sort of a Cockney slang. So there's actually a glossary in the back for when you don't know what the hell he's talking about or what this rhyming stuff is. You can go into the back and kind of get a whole new vocabulary.
The only book with subtitles. So anyways, Todd, so happy to have you here. Thank you.
That's the
Todd,
welcome? That's the welcome.
That's the welcome. Todd and I have been friends for decades, and we were in the Falling Willendas together from 94 to 98, would you say, or is 97? Or 93, maybe?
I would say 93 to 97, sort of. Yeah.
And
96 was questionable.
But anyway, so we're going to start our little talk with what you think of when you think of the movie Spinal Tap.
Look, I'm incredibly close to it, having worked with the guys a couple times. But the thing that sort of amazes me is the first week I was at Berklee College of Music. There was like a Friday night showing of Spinal Tap in the Berklee Performance Center. So there's, like 2,000 people in there. And to think that I would be in the future working with those guys was incredible, because that movie was already legendary by 1987. Clearly, it came out in, I think, 82?
Actually, it was 1984.
I don't know what my favorite bit would be, but here's my favorite bit that no one ever talks about. It's a line no one ever recites at all, because everyone's too busy ha-haing at they can't find the stage and hello Cleveland. But when they stop and they ask the janitor how to get to the stage, he's explaining, but you got to go to, and you got to jog left. And Harry Shearer goes, "We don't have time for a jog." But it's sort of lost in the hysteria, and people are laughing because they can't find the stage, but we don't have time for a jog. And that's just something that just deeply tickles me every time. And even some ardent Spinal Tap fans have missed that line because they're too busy laughing at all the things surrounding it.
Well, first off, you elitist snob, he was a maintenance engineer, not a janitor. And second, you want to hear an interesting fact about that? That actor's real name was the late Wonderful Smith, and he was close personal friends with Hattie McDaniel, the Oscar-winning actress from Gone with the Wind. So bear with me as I weave this into a spinal tapestry. Wonderful became the cosmic conduit, the lukewarm water, so to speak, between Gone with the Wind and Break Like the Wind.
Yeah, I love that scene too, Todd. The thing that's stuck out for me is as they're moving around, one of them says, "Where's Ian? He should be here." And as a tour manager, that was like, "Oh yeah, where's Alex? He should be here. There's not the right beer in the dressing room. There's not the right peppers on the pizza." So I've heard that call myself.
And there are some venues where you're like, who designed this? MC Escher? Why is this a rat maze to get to the stage?
I mean, that's why all the roadies have mag lights, right? Because to your point, Todd, it's sort of like the risk of physical injury, whether you're going to drop out a door or fall off the edge of the stage. It's hazardous.
There's an unwritten rule. Like if it's pitch black, don't take a step.
Right.
You could fall 10, 15 feet if you're not careful.
Yeah.
If you don't know where you're going or the surroundings are unfamiliar to you. If it's pitch black, don't move.
I remember being in Houston with Radiohead and at the end of the set, the band went one way off the stage and Johnny Greenwood went the other way. He went the dark way and he actually did go off the side. Fortunately, it wasn't too far of a drop. And he was young. He was only 20, so he was resilient.
We have glow tape all over our stage with Styx because we have ramps and stairs and stuff like that. And, guys well into their 60s now running around with guitars. And all of a sudden, if the lights go out or all of a sudden it's a little dark, it could be a wipeout. So glow tape is a very essential thing to have for touring rock bands at any level, even if you're a young band in the club level. Invest in some rolls of glow tape because it could save your life.
Todd, you mentioned working with Spinal Tap. Can you tell us something about that?
Well, the first time I got a call from C.J. Vanston, who is their musical director, and C.J. does all the music for Chris Guest's movies, and he's been on 1,000 records from Joe Cocker to Toto to, he's the only musician on Richard Marx's Right Here Waiting for You that's not Richard Marx singing. So he was from Lansing, Michigan, was successful in the Chicago scene, moved to L.A. in maybe 1989, 90, something like that, and then he exploded. So he was their musical director. And when I came up in the studio scene in Chicago, I was friends with a lot of his friends. So I met him when I played in California. When I moved out there, I did my very first session with CJ. And Greg Ladagny, by the way, who died falling off a stage.
Oh, my.
So yeah, CJ called me. It was Greg Bissonet's gig, a well-known session drummer in Los Angeles for many years. And Greg couldn't do this date. And he said, "Hey, can you do The Tonight Show in 2 weeks?" And it just so happened that I was home for 2 days. I had to be flying out that night, but the answer was yes, I could do it. So we were playing Stonehenge. Got together, rehearsal. Those guys were very, very mellow, but very, very funny. They sort of laugh like this. So I'm hearing the funniest stuff in the world, and Chris Guest just kind of rolls back his head and just kind of smiles for a second, and that's it. And I'm on the floor. So it's a firing squad of comedy, but very calmly delivered. All lovely human beings, and they all want to play their instruments well. You know, you'd think they're all very famous and wealthy actors, comedians, writers, movie stars, whatever. But when they have their instruments in their hand, they really want to play well. So it's kind of fun to see that they weren't just, whatever, it's this. They wanted to play their best. And it wasn't until the show day that I realized that they were going to have a couple little people in the 18-inch monument and the whole deal for Stonehenge. We were in the dressing room, and my then fiance, Taylor, was with me in the green room. And I didn't know, I'm pretty sure it was Vern Troyer, who was one of the little people.
Really?
And I mean, he was like 2 feet tall. I mean, yeah, I mean, he was tiny. And he walked by in a suit, and Taylor went, "Oh, baby."
Oh, no.
And I'm like, no.
Oh, boy.
So that's how that started. But the thing that really cracked me up is when it was, okay, 5 minutes, go take your places on stage. We go down. And to me, it was the three were the three guys, Harry, Chris, and Michael. But when they have their outfits on, you're like, holy smokes, it's them. It's Spinal Tap. There they are. So we go down, and there's a piece of paper on my snare drum printed that says set list number 1, Stonehenge. And that's it. And I was just dying laughing. And thank God I had the wherewithal to kind of take that piece of paper, fold it, and put it in my stick bag because, that's going home with me. So that's been in a frame in my office ever since that day, which would have been 20 years ago. That was October of 2000.
Did you ever have a Spinal Tap moment with Spinal Tap?
Not really, other than when we were in the green room at the Daily Show. Chris had ordered some deli sandwich, like a corned beef sandwich, and his bread was really small, and there was just tons of meat. And he opened it up, and he said, just like Nigel, but in his regular American accent, "Would you look at this?" And the way he looked at me, he didn't even have to say it. I knew. It's like, damn it, all these years later, he just wants a large-sized bread. The bread was too small for that sandwich, clearly.
So do you know what that moment was taken from? It's all based on Van Halen's aversion to brown M&Ms. In their rider, it says no brown M&Ms. That's kind of what that...
But that they don't have an aversion to it. The bands would just do bullshit like that just to make sure that the promoters are reading the rider. I mean, bands of, I want a monkey skull and, half a pack of Lucky Strikes from the Vietnam era, whatever, nonsense that they come up with. They want to make sure that the promoters are reading the rider. And, there are some people that are, whatever, have peanut allergies or gluten-free or whatever their thing is. But yeah, there's a lot of nonsense with that.
Yeah. You know what, Todd, it's cool to hear about the Spinal Tap guys getting into character the way you described it, right? And having a set list, a one-song set list is kind of like, this is a show. We're doing a real gig.
Well, that's part of why the movie works, is because the music works, right? I mean, I've seen so many stand-up comedy movies that don't work because the jokes aren't funny. And although it is kind of goofy, the lyrics, sex farm woman and plowing your bean fields, the songs are great.
Well, they nailed all the eras. I did get to play Give Me Some Money with them on the end of the Daily Show. But even that, they tap into, no pun intended, they tap into that sort of the nomenclature of like a 1965, like the Kinks, what I'm doing. And a little bit of that na thing. They nail that. And then listen to the Flower People. That whole thing is genius. If you've ever heard the whole song, especially not just the 30 seconds that's in the movie, but if you listen to that whole thing, there's other sections that is just, it's a beautiful homage to that sort of psychedelic, self-important thing. It's just like a Mozart symphony, and there's dun 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 section right there. It's just really clever. It's really funny, and it makes you smile. So yeah, it's friggin' good.
And the medieval stuff, because that's a funny genre that Led Zeppelin gets into, and obviously Jethro Tull, like the Black Death era stuff, but they nail that too. What's the album where they're in the church? Which one is that?
Oh, the Gospel According to Spinal Tap.
Yeah, that is awesome. Speaking of medieval, you've got a good story about the royal family, right, Todd?
Well, so right when I moved to Los Angeles, I just want to set the scene here. I moved to Los Angeles sort of unceremoniously. I leave Chicago right after my second Styx tour. So I've got a house in Chicago, and now I'm renting a house in the Hollywood Hills, and I'm not making any money, and not like I'm working at Walmart making any money. I'm literally making no money and have two houses. So a couple things started to come in, and I got a call from Wade Hubbard, who I worked with in Chicago. And he said, hey, would you want to do 2 songs with David Hasselhoff in England for the Princess Diana Memorial?
She was such a Hasselhoff head.
Dear friends. And I said, sure. Okay. So here's the 2 songs. Had 1 rehearsal. And then we were going to fly over to England, played with the BBC Orchestra, because all the acts that were on the bill were playing with the BBC Orchestra. And it's at the Althorpe Palace, which is like, that's the Spencer family home. That's where Princess Diana grew up. It looks like the Chicago Museum of Natural History. It's amazing. You know, she was not a commoner. And so there's a reception. The first thing we do, we go in there and David drops a glass. That's probably a 300-year-old crystal. So it's immediately, we're the American bulls in the china shop.
Was he in his swimsuit at the time, and did he have shoes on?
No, he was not. He was dressed appropriately. But there's Diana's mother with a tray of sushi, and she comes over and like, would you like some sushi? And Scott goes, only if you're serving it up. And I thought,
oh dear,
awesome.
Oh dear.
And thankfully she kind of, giggled a bit. But I thought, boy, it's pretty clear the Americans just walked in the building here.
Oh my goodness.
Well, so you're playing with David Hasselhoff. You got to talk about that a little bit. I mean, that's David Hasselhoff probably watches Spinal Tap and goes, that band's really got their shit together.
Look, my experience of that weekend was a ton of fun. It was a great experience. Like great hotels, was wined and dined, met a bunch of cool people, and the party at the Palace, it was spectacular. And by the way, I have to tie this into Styx, because just a few months before that, in the 1997 Styx tour, when we played Montreal and Quebec City, there was this guy, Gowan, that was opening these 2 shows. And I remember I got to the venue early, and it was just solo piano. And the entire sold-out arena knew every song, was singing along with this guy. And I'm thinking, wow, this must be some like French-Canadian Elton John type guy. I don't know. But the songs were cool, and he was addressing everyone in French. So at the end of the second show, and I really liked the music, I went up and I said, excuse me, I don't speak your language. And he goes, it's okay, I don't speak it either. I had no idea he was from Toronto. We chatted, and it was actually the only time ever in my career I asked an opening anything like, do you have a CD? I'd love a CD. So he gave me a live solo piano CD. I mean, I took it home, I listened to it, a bunch of songs I really, really dug, and that was it. So now I'm in London rehearsing with the BBC, and I'm looking at all the artists that are on the list, and hey, there's Gowan. Lawrence Gowan's here. And just as I realize that, I see him walking up to me in the lobby. We're about to pass each other. And I said, Lawrence, Todd Sucherman from Styx. Hey, how you doing? He's like, yeah, how you doing, man? What are you doing here? Oh, I'm over here playing 2 songs with David Hasselhoff. Like, oh, okay. But anyway, we reconnected at this party. And after dinner, everyone sort of ended up in the great room, and different artists got up and would play 1 or 2 songs. And everyone was in there. There's this giant staircase, and people were sitting up in rows of 10s going up this giant staircase, this double banistered friggin' palace. And Lawrence got up there and he did Somebody to Love by Queen and blew the fucking roof off that place. It was unbelievable. So postscript, when I said goodbye to Dave, we were all hammered. And we were in this 18th century hotel. And I was walking up the banister staircase to go to my room because I had to wake up early and fly home. And David was complaining that there was no ding dong coming from the grandfather clock. And he had his head in the grandfather clock going, "There's no dong! There's no dong!" And I'm like, "Take care, dude." And that's the last I saw him.
So going back to Lawrence Gowan, he ended up taking over Dennis DeYoung's role as lead singer for Styx. Doesn't he have a legendary story, an incredible Spinal Tap moment?
He might have one of the best rock and roll stories of all time. And obviously Lawrence tells it so much better because it happened to him and he was there. So I'll try to paraphrase the best I can. So this was in the days when bands would, you'd travel and you'd play a big rock club for like a week, and the club would put you up at the band condo, and that's how it was. The same thing with comedians. You'd have the comedian condo or da-da-da. So there's the band condo, and they were somewhere in the maritime provinces, Halifax or New Brunswick or something like that. And his band was called Rheingold at the time. And they were super, super progressive rock, like wore makeup and capes and outfits. And the drummer had a giant drum set with chimes and a gong. And it was very, very elaborate. And Lawrence's rig was like, Keith Emerson surrounded by keyboards set up on a white shag rug. So they're booked into wherever they were in this maritime town in a maritime province. And there happened to be a circus truck with circus animals. And this guy who, in my mind, had some sort of accent, whether he was French or Italian, and his circus thing was set to open up in a couple days from then. And Lawrence is hanging out with this guy chatting, and the guy goes, "Would you like to use some of the animals for your performance?" And Lawrence just said, "Absolutely, yes." Because one of their opening songs, or a song that was in their set, something called like "Welcome to the Circus" or "The Menagerie of something." There's some animal-themed friggin' song they had. So Lawrence had in his mind that it's going to be pitch black, there's going to be a pin spot, and the show's going to open up where Lawrence is going to be standing there holding two chains, one holding a lion, one holding a panther, and then with a monkey on his shoulder, like a circus grinder monkeys. And he thought, okay.
Standard thing.
Right. Of course. As you would expect to see in a rock club in 1976 or whenever it was. 77, I think it was actually. So behind the stage, behind the drums and the curtain was the truck bay. So even though Lawrence is holding these animals, those animals were tied behind the stage in the truck bay so they couldn't leap out and lunge into the audience and maul and kill people, right? But it was going to look like Lawrence was holding these beasts. So I forget the sequence of events. Something happens where, okay, we're going to start the show. We're set up here and the lights go on. All of a sudden, the audience, there's a audible because holy shit, there's a panther and a lion and this dude in this getup with a cape holding this stuff, right? Like a top hat. And something happens and Lawrence realizes, oh, I'm allergic to cats. And he sneezes, the monkey jumps off his shoulder, goes on his keyboard rig, and then starts climbing up the lighting truss and going, shaking the lighting truss. And just the mood all of a sudden gets kind of uneasy. And the line starts to move and kind of chuffs a little bit. And then the panther moves and steps on a Moog Taurus pedal. And if you don't know what a Moog Taurus pedal is, imagine the low bass pedals of a pipe organ. It's the lowest subsonic frequency like synthesizer thing that you can imagine that shakes your eyeballs and shakes the room and shakes your gut. So the panther steps on this. And this freaks out the lion who roars. And Lawrence says, if you've ever stood next to a roaring lion, it's the loudest thing you've ever heard on top of the subsonic bass that's happening with his Taurus pedals. Now, this freaks out the panther who projectile shits buckets all over Lawrence's keyboard rig and all over his white shag carpet. Now, as this is happening, the monkey's still up on the lighting truss going, and the circus guy is reeling in the chains, so the animals are being dragged through shit and through, the carpet and the rugs that are coming up, and they're trying to move the mic cords so they don't take the mic cords, and these animals are pulled back stage, and now Lawrence had to go walk behind his keyboards and play the whole rest of that show with panther shit all over his stuff, standing in it in the white rug.
Yeah, Alan, I think we have to fact check that story. That is almost too good to be true.
Milder than kimchi, sharper than mash.
That was the song Gum in the Gash from Derek Small's little-known solo album, Small's Change, Meditations on Aging. Todd, I've known you since you were an infant, and I had no idea that was you playing drums on that song.
I did 2 songs on Derek's record. One was Gum in the Gash, and the other was Faith No More. Sadly, the digital imprint was credited to Greg Bissonette on Gum in the Gash, but that is in fact me, and doing the drum solo with just me and Steve Vai. That was a happy moment when I realized I wasn't credited on that.
We're using this episode to set the record straight, Todd.
Yes, that was me. If you've ever wondered who played drums on Gum in the Gash, that's me.
Let me ask you something about Styx. You mentioned playing sold-out arenas in Toronto, I think it was. You mentioned playing at casinos. I remember when I was touring, bands playing county fairs, and those actually paying pretty well. I mean, you've probably run the gamut. Any stories or thoughts on kind of the span of venues that you've experienced with Styx and funny things that brought up?
Well, things can be surprising. And I shared a sentiment with Lawrence once a few years ago where we played somewhere, I want to say it was off the Mississippi River somewhere, like the Illinois-Iowa border. And it was some county fair, and it was pretty grim. You showed up and it looked like this racetrack from 1938, and porta potties and these trailers for dressing rooms. And let's face it, it's pretty far from the Marble Ritz-Carlton suite, the bathrooms and dressing rooms, right? And it was just, it was hot. It's like almost 100 degrees and humid. And I remember getting there and just kind of thinking, let's get this one over with. And I normally don't feel that way, right? And I don't want to say unprofessional, but it's a bummer. But look, everyone's human. Sometimes you just feel like, this is grim. But we went out there and there was probably 8,000 or 9,000 people, and they were beyond enthusiastic, and a young audience and girlfriends up on their boyfriends' shoulders, and it was just bedlam. It was phenomenal. It was a memorable gig. It's one that I'm bringing up out of playing 2,000 plus gigs with these guys. And we get off stage, and I say to Lawrence, "That was fucking unbelievable." And he goes, "I know." He goes, "I'm asked at every single interview I do, what's your favorite venue to play? Is it like Red Rocks? Is it the Gorge? Is it the Beacon Theater?" That's my favorite venue to play when that happens. So that really is a lesson. Don't prejudge a situation just because you show up and there's porta potties. I never thought like this is beneath us, whatever. That's just what this day was.
That's quite big difference than when you and I and the Falling Melendez played the Wisconsin State Fair, and they came over to us and said, "Hey, can you guys turn down? You're disturbing the pigs." And so we had to turn down because you don't want to disturb the pigs.
I think you guys would disturb the pigs at any volume.
Let's focus on some of the follies of the Falling Melendez, because those really are a few of my favorite worst gigs. We did have some great gigs. Some of the gigs were just absolutely soul-crushing.
I think all of them were.
Well, here's one. And Alex, I'm sure you weren't there for that because you had way too much sense. But we were due to play a club in Milwaukee on the coldest night in recorded history. It was something like 44 below, before wind chill. And it was on the news, do not leave your house unless it's absolutely essential. Warning, instant death. And I called Alan late afternoon and I said, man, we have to cancel this gig. This is ridiculous. And Alan, the friggin' Boy Scout you were, like, nope, we made a commitment. He's never going to be there. It's in the paper. They spent money on ads. Oh, my God. So, loading the drums, drive up, unload the drums, set up the gig. We played for like 3 people. And I was just seething the whole time. I wanted to reach over my drums and strangle you right there. And like, oh yeah, we were in the paper. Now we're going to be in the paper.
And we still disturbed the pigs.
I probably was there.
Somehow the pigs still got disturbed.
And I just remember like loading the drums in and driving home and just, finally getting home and thinking that was trauma. That was
we were the meteorologically challenged band. Remember we played Summerfest, the big festival.
Please allow me to tell this one. We're playing Summerfest, and there was 8, 9, 10,000 people there. And we'd be like, we're going to play for a big house here. And looking over Lake Michigan, here came the alien spaceship in Independence Day. The longest, darkest black cloud came. And as the other band finished, and we were moving our gear onto the stage and I'm setting up the drums. Now it is just pouring, pelting down violently. And where there once was 10,000 people standing, there was nary a soul. Literally no human beings. I could have blown off a machine gun just spraying the area and no one would have been harmed because there was nobody left. And it rained and it rained and it rained. And finally, as it started to let up, they were like, sorry, guys, we have a schedule. We have all these other bands. Sorry.
You and I had a Spinal Tap moment that had nothing to do with music. My wedding day.
Oh, my God. You really want to talk about that one? Only a control freak, the level that you are, would have a surprise wedding for your wife who should have murdered you on the spot had it gone to plan, by the way. That's insane. Anyone I've ever brought that story up to, they're like, what? A surprise wedding? Hey, it's happening.
So Todd and I had a little falling out because he joined Styx and we had a band together. So we hadn't spoken probably in a year. And I was having a surprise wedding for my wife. And our mutual friend and bandmate, Scott, was one of the 6 people in attendance. And Scott is not someone that bothers the details like, oh yeah, it's a surprise. So he told Todd we were getting married the next day. So Todd, I think as an olive branch, called me up and left a message on our phone saying, hey, congratulations, I heard you guys are getting married tomorrow.
I mean, I felt horrible, but ask any friend's wife, like, who does that, Alan?
No, that actually was very good because Lois was very thrilled. She had 23 hours to prepare for the wedding. But it was a Spinal Tap moment. You got to admit, life has Spinal Tap moments.
It certainly does.
Todd has said a lot of funny things. Like we actually recorded our second album, Belittle, at Butch Vig's Smart Studios. It was the youngest guy in the band, a lot less refined back then. And he always had to go to Walgreens and get dinner.
That is not true at all. We ate at good restaurants. If anyone who knows me, like I am a bit of a foodie, but I like to snack at night. And that's why we go there. To get, beef jerkies and stuff like that. I didn't have dinner at Walgreens.
So this is the kind of food he is. He got a Slim Jim or something, and he said, if it ain't beefy, it better be cheesy. That was his palate.
Let me say 2 more things. One is I was reading some background on Styx today, and so many of those songs are the soundtrack of my adolescence. I mean, I thought, oh yeah, I remember that from middle school. Oh yeah, I remember that from high school, and tied to specific summers and stuff like that. So those songs have a real firm place in my memory of growing up, which I appreciate.
Well, I'm glad it's that way for you. I know that's not the case with Alan, but I'm glad that's the case with you.
I like Lorelei.
Like your consolation one that you can think of.
So Todd, let me ask you one more thing. How can people who want to know more about you or want to interact with your work, how can they find you?
You can find me at toddsucherman.com. You can find me on Instagram and on Facebook. I'm pretty accessible. So feel free to drop a note and say hello.
Well, what about your real successful teaching DVDs?
Those are available also at the web store at toddsucherman.com, as well as my solo CD and signed items, trinkets, little bits, used drumsticks, Pennsylvania Dutch novelties.
All levity aside, people can learn from the master, which is great. Okay, Todd.
Great interview,
thank you so
Todd.
much.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. It's great to reconnect with you guys. I hope I provided some infotainment, entertainment, jocularity, escape from the real world.
We hope you enjoyed this blast from the past. If so, then make sure to do a deep dive into our other hysterically humbling episodes with members of the Police, Heart, Garbage, Soul Asylum, Drive-By Truckers, Old Crow Medicine Show, as well as comedians Fred Armisen, David Cross, actor Amy Brenneman, artist Shepard Fairey, and many, many more.
Yes, you can find our entire catalog on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, CastBox, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. This is Alan Keller. Stick around, because straight up, we're going to have a song from the Falling Melindas that Todd played drums on. It's called Good Thing from our first album.
And it's a great one. And I'm Alex Hoffman. Thanks for joining us on
Too Much Effing Perspective.
Some things I'm slow to comprehend. When the light goes from walk to run as fast as you can. When stranger turns to lover, then stranger again. I know a good thing when I see it. I know a good thing when I see it. I know a good thing when I see it. I know a good thing when I see it.
Although it would be as great as having armadillos in our trousers, this podcast is not affiliated with This is Spinal Tap, and no person or entity connected with the film has sponsored or endorsed its content. This podcast is not affiliated, sponsored, or licensed by Authorized Spinal Tap LLC or Century of Progress Productions. Evergreen Podcast Network.